A new era is upon us. Pulse has taken the world by storm as the leading Web3 social media. Beyond current features like casting, tipping, inscription trading, and earning, it's now elevating to the next level, on-chain.
Soil, a fully regulated, seamless link between traditional finance and the digital crypto world, offering secure returns fully backed by tangible, real-world assets.
The Credify testnet is live, so head on over to demo.credify.finance to see how you can effortlessly experiment with autonomous earning, NFT corporate bonds, Credi and X-Credi utilities, and Module X.
Good afternoon, everyone. BC Richfield here, coming to you live from London. It's just gone a couple of minutes past midday here, which makes it a couple of minutes past 1100 UTC. Big shout out to everybody joining us live today, as well as everybody that's going to be watching this on recording. So we are here for our Alt Request Wednesday. So as it starts off, we've got an ETH chart up. We've had a few come in the comments, but please do let us know, guys and girls, what it is you would like to take a look at today. And we will make some time to cover it, or certainly as many as we can. So while we let everybody start to kind of filter through, then let's kind of start and take a look at Ethereum, shall we? Okay, so got the daily chart up here. Now, this has actually been really quite nice and clear for me. So we had this really, really large inefficiency here, this fair value gap. Rune, hey Craigie boy, good morning, good morning. No problem, we'll take a look at Rune. So look, while we're in this, quite often what you'll see with these, any kind of moves, right? And let's give some examples. So this high to this low here, this high to this low here. Now, if we take a look at these in terms of looking with our Fibonacci, okay, we can see that the 50% line here, and let me just put the numbers on so you guys can see those. Right, you can see that the 50% level, and that's that low to that high. What happens? Price sells off, right? And then we get a retracement up back into this 50% level, okay? Within that, we're looking for, typically for price to move from external liquidity to internal liquidity, so that when we take a low, like we did here, for example, we expect price to trace up. And then up here, we look for our fair value gaps. If we can't find those fair value gaps, then we look for the order blocks, etc. Now, we can see exactly the same thing on this drop over here. So we've now just taken this high to this low. So mark them up to make it a bit clearer for you guys. And now what we're looking at here is what happens. Price comes down, takes external liquidity in the form of this low. Okay, obviously took these smaller lows over here as well, but this is a bit more significant because that's a key swing low. Now, if you're ever struggling to kind of find those, you know, what are swing lows, what are swing highs? Some people say you need, you know, for a swing high to be valid, you need it to be flanked by two lower highs, etc. I'm very much of the belief that it's just for a swing high or a swing low, you need, say, for example, this candle, the center candle has to be higher, and then it has to be flanked by a lower high on either side. For a swing high, for a swing low, you've got two higher lows either side. Now, when you look at this, you can see the prominence of this, right? You can see it's come down and come back up. So there's a likelihood that there's stop losses under there, meaning there's liquidity. When you see these smaller lows, yeah, forgetting about the fact this is an intermediate term low within a fair value gap, which actually poses a really, really good liquidity pool, you know, it's a lot less likely that the less obvious ones are going to see a key reaction, all right? So as we can see here, this big, long, clear, obvious low, price comes into it here, even though price long-term is still heading off in a downtrend, excuse me, we can see the price hits this and then has a reaction higher, okay? So that's what we were looking at here in this move. So if we take that same logic now and we apply that over here, we can see that we've had this move up here from price. So just taking the most obvious low, the swing low to the swing high. And we can now see that price is holding this 50% level here on ETH, which is really, really good. So again, price has come up, taken external liquidity from over here. It's also taken local external liquidity here. And then it's sold off where to our inefficiency lower down. 1 second, guys, just going to close up the windows. Apologies, guys. We've got a lot of building works going on in London at the moment, and that was incredibly loud. Hopefully that didn't disturb too many of you. So anyway, coming back to this now, as we're looking here, we've got this retracement. Look at how price is holding this 50% level, okay? Now, the best way to kind of look at this in terms of why this concept kind of makes sense from a logic point of view, think of it in terms of, if you were studying it in terms of ICT, you'd be looking at this as premium and discount, right? Meaning that you'd be favoring long setups from the bottom 50% and shorts from the top 50%. Now that makes a lot of sense just purely from a risk to reward perspective, all right? So that's how we are looking at those. So, B Burrs, I see you in there, mate. Yes, certainly. Take a look at Ondo. I know that's been a hot topic lately as well. And Pendle, yeah, sure. And when we do Rune, we look at the USDT pairs and BTC. Yeah, no problem, guys. So as we look at this at the moment, the first thing that stands out to me is that we've had a really decent corrective move down here. All right. Now, something that we'll touch upon a little bit later is that we've got a lot of strength in the equity markets at the moment. And by the equity markets, more focus on indices, you know, S&P 500, NASDAQ, especially the NASDAQ, you know, which is so heavily weighted towards technology stocks. But normally, if we're seeing, you know, prosperous conditions with those, the market's appetite for risk is normally pretty decent. And that quite often kind of works its way down into crypto. Now, we haven't really seen that of late, and we haven't really had that direct correlation, but we still want those market conditions to remain favorable, all right? So we're going to cover that later. But anyway, as we look at this here, if we're looking to formulate a plan, well, quite simply on a daily scale, what I would be looking for is this. We have a very small fair value gap here. Okay, on a daily scale, the gap that's here. Now, we want to see, if we're in a downtrend, we want to see bearish gaps respected for continuation, all right? Or we want to see them violated, yeah, meaning that we get them closed above in this case, in which case we would have an inverted fair value gap. And then we expect that, if price was to have closed above here, for example, we would expect that to act support as price then seeks liquidity higher. Now, that's really what the bulls want to see with this gap here on a daily scale. We want to see price close above here because, look, everything that we've just discussed is setting up for this to be a potential pivot point, for this to be a potential reversal, okay? Because we've swept liquidity from the lows, all right? So we've come down into the lower 50% of this. And actually, even if we looked at the range itself, yeah, price is coming to the lower 50% of this as well, okay? And it's holding that level, which is normally a sign of strength. So while price is in this state, we really want to see a close above this here. And then my first target will be the local swing high here, which is at 3,652.81 here on Femex, okay? So if we just take this down now to our 4 hour, we can see the beginning of what we want to see here. The displacement leg lower, also known as the manipulation leg, right? As that's come down there, it's driven and it's taken out this low, then we've got this bearish gap here. And what we're talking about here is exactly what we looked at on the daily. So remember that this is a daily gap, right? So I'm going to remove this just for the moment because that's what we're looking to hold. We want to see price hold above this level. We can see how it's starting to do so here. Now, this is the inversion. As we were talking about wanting to see this inverted on the daily, we've already got that here on the 4 hour. So now on a 4 hour scale, especially intraday, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this to hold. I'm just going to do this in green so it stands out, all right? So we've inverted this now, meaning that this should offer strong support. We've now set this bullish gap here on the close of this candle. What's price done? Price has taken a local higher here. So remember, as we discussed before, if price has taken external liquidity, we now expect price to draw down into internal liquidity. And what this does is this gives us a really good playbook because price drawing down and holding here means that we're now looking for intraday long setups. Yeah. Remember, this is a daily gap, right? So price can move in and above this for quite a while today through until the close. We're not going to know if this gets above it or closes below it until the close of day. All right. So until then, want to focus more on our 4 hour and say, look, we're delivering from a higher time frame daily bullish gap here. Yes, we've got this bearish gap here, but we know price can still move higher or lower. So while we've got this clean price action here, we've got clear targets as well, same as aforementioned 3,652.81 here on Femex. We want to see price draw down into this and then look to make a play higher. Now, one thing that's tricky here is that we have a secondary gap lower, all right? And I'm just going to draw that in and I'll tell you as for why. Because I'll be looking for this 4-hour gap here to hold. If price were to close below it, and let's just say, for example, price comes down and we get a close something like that, and we haven't reached in and tagged this lower FVG, well, then we could look for price to pull back to this here. Remember, we would need a 4-hour close below this. It would then turn this into an inversion, meaning it's support term resistance. So we could look for slight pullbacks here and then intraday trade it down into the lower gaps here. Now, doesn't mean again that on a daily scale, price can't recapture this, right? So we need to be aware of our time frames. But for me, that's a really, really clear plan. So as long as we hold this, then on the lower time frames, I'm going to be looking for something like this. Right, we're going to look for a level. And then we want price to come into this level. We want to see a sweep. We want to see price have a strong recovery. Yeah. And then we're looking for this area here. So price comes in, takes out key liquidity, yeah, on a higher time frame or into, like we said, that higher time frame bullish gap. Price draws down into this. We then want to see an impulse move higher. And what you want to see in this move ideally is a gap. You can look to trade off of that gap, or you could look to trade off of a breaker candle, which would be your last up close candle here. Yeah, before the purge on liquidity, you can then set your orders on this on a limit line. Price comes in and tags you in here. Or, you know, you could use something like this, for example, just take the high that swept the low, wait for an explosive move above that. Yeah, you could, if you wanted to, take market orders there. That's up to you and your risk and your strategy. Or you could just put an order on this line, wait for price to tag you in. You've got clear invalidation below here, right? So you know where you're wrong. And from there, you can trade further up. All right. Hey, Nit, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. So that's really the thought process here on ETH. So I'll be looking for this to trade higher today. And like I say, kind of targets in here, 3,652.81 here on Femex. But, you know, always in the back of my mind here is on the higher time frame on the daily, right? We need to be seeing this level hold. We want to see price close above, and then we could really be looking for a resurgence in that. If we're looking at today, as I was talking about earlier, at the indices, then things are looking good as it stands. We've got huge strength continuation here on the NASDAQ. Let me just put that on the NQ contracts. It's got a lot less markup on it. All right. And we can see what's going on here, making price go up, held this order block. Price is just continuing to expand higher. This is in all-time high territory now, right? So this is just purely pushing to take out and set new all-time highs. When you're in that mode of delivery, then you're just looking to long these things until they break. For anybody that is interested in the NASDAQ, all right, remember today is a US holiday, all right? So please do be aware of that, obviously, if you're trading, but also if you're trading crypto and other assets, that can definitely have a big impact because the US market is the largest and certainly injects the most volatility. So when we're looking at this along here, we can see how these closed up. The dollar closed down, all right? So that's the dollar index. We can see that that's heading back down towards this level, a really key level for us at 105.099, which is a key pivot point here for the dollar index, in my opinion. So while this continues down, and I think we could have more downside here, that's a really good sign for risk assets, and that then pours into crypto, okay? So let's have a look, shall we? So we wanted to look at Rune. Let's see what we've got going here on Rune. We've got a nice clean chart. I'm actually going to zoom out to the weekly for this one, right? Because we can see price has been in a really big sell-off here. We can see we've tagged some key liquidity targets. So that here is certainly where I'll be looking for price to reach down to. The reason I was just checking that to see if they were equal lows, they're not. This low has swept that one. So I don't really like that with equal lows. I much prefer something like this as equal lows. right? Even though this is further away, you can see how this hasn't taken liquidity. These end up being a really good draw on liquidity as well. And we can see price has kind of torn down into this here. So I think where price is probably heading, we might see a recovery here. We can see this little downside wick. We've had prices started to see some absorption. However, we can see, you know, we also got similar here when we just tagged into that, we had a small correction and price ultimately heading lower. I think if we're looking for these now, this is an intermediate term low for anybody that studies ICT, but you know, it's a very, very simple concept and a typical price action concept, which is we see liquidity within our gaps, which we have here. And what we can notice here is this low travels through this gap, you know, making it a really good liquidity pool. All right. So we can see how this area supported price once, twice, 3 times. Now price is purging down, clearing out some liquidity. So for me, this seems like a decent place as any to see some kind of resurgence here. So let's keep that in mind as we draw down the time frames. Remember, that was a weekly chart, guys. All right, so we're dealing with very high time frames. Now on a daily scale, this is super, super clear for me. We've taken this low, obviously taken this low as well. What's our expectation there? Well, when we come down and we take external liquidity, we look for price to retrace to internal liquidity. So we're looking for our fair value gaps. We have this one here on the daily. So I'll just draw that in. So the expectation now is that price is kind of drawing towards this for one of 2 reasons, right? It's drawing up towards this so it can continue to sell off lower and take out liquidity here. And then below that swing low, should that set, or it's looking to close above this, right? And violate that. If that's the case, then we're looking for price to then use this as support and move towards the next pocket of liquidity, which would be this high here. Okay, so that's what I'd be looking at on a daily scale. Now, obviously, that means intraday, the bias would actually be bullish, which is a counter trend bias. There is no doubt that price is in a downtrend here, right? Lower lows and lower highs. We can see as it's selling off. So what we want to do is say to ourselves, all right, we need to be aware that price is still on a daily scale in a bearish trend. So any longs we're going to take, we want to get in and out quite quickly, or I want to get in and out quite quickly, because I don't know if this is where price is going to reverse or if it's merely just pulling back a little bit before it wants to sell off again. And the likelihood is that it's looking to do this, right? Because until this breaks, we're still delivering with bearish order flow. So as we look in here and we move that plan down to a 4-hour, right, we can see that, again, we have a really, really big gap here currently holding price. Now, we don't know if price has got the strength. Just draw this in as well. We don't know here if price has got the strength to get above this, right? So for me, this is how I'm looking at it. While price is within here, again, we're delivering from a bearish gap. So I'm just going to do this in red so it really stands out. So while we're delivering from a bearish gap, the expectation is for price to push lower. So there's 2 things we can do here. The daily is telling us that we should see a correction here, but as far as we know, this may be the correction. All right. Now, there's something we can do to add an extra layer of granularity here. We can draw in this lower gap, which is a bullish gap, and we can say to ourselves this: if we get long setups in here intraday, then chances are that price is still pushing towards this daily inefficiency here. So price is pushed up to set a high. This could be a higher low, and then price pushes up further. Or price comes down and closes below this, in which case we would then invert this fair value gap, which you'll see purple. If that happens, then our liquidity targets are to the downside, and we would start by looking at this one here at 3.869. All right, mate. And then on Rune as well, you wanted to do Rune BTC. So Rune BTC looks like a slightly different animal here. So in terms of liquidity that it's hunting, you would want to see a reaction here at this low. These kind of key lows often tell you a lot about what price is going to do by the way that the candles interact with it. This one, for example, all right. Now, if we look at that low, that is a key low. I'll just get rid of that one for a moment. Why? So you've got an abnormal wick here. It holds this bullish gap, and you can see by the long downside wick that price had a lot of absorption here. So there was obviously a lot of buying pressure here, all right? So price came down, found enough liquidity in here, and then price ripped. When price revisited this, obviously came into this level here, we can see how price got bought up, and it led to that bullish correction. Why and where to? Well, why? Because we've taken external liquidity, and then price from there likes to visit internal liquidity, all right, in the form of this bearish gap. Now, remember, we hold this bearish gap here. Therefore, our expectation is that price is then going to come down and seek the next liquidity pool, which is this low, right? And that's exactly what we've done. Now, the reason that I'm drawing these across is the same reason I did with this one, right? Now, I'm going to get rid of this one again very quickly, just to finish this point. Now, look at the lows, right? So look at this low. Look at how price fails to close below it. When it comes back into it again, you can see the buyers stepping in. That's why we have the long downside wicks, right? Now, what you're looking for down here is then when we come in and engage with this very same low again, we can see how price then closes below this. This key level is then displaced below. We're then saying to ourselves, okay, well, where's the next liquidity pool below that? It's this, and price kind of took that out with the same move. However, the fact that we closed below this was a sign that price was a little bit heavy. Now what we want to see is how price reacts at this level. We close below like this and we leave this low intact down here, right? And especially if we close below this fair value gap here, which is what's currently supporting price, yeah, that's what gives us our bias, right? Price closes below here. Remember, this is a weekly sale, guys. We've got to wait for the week to play out yet, so a lot can happen. But if we do close below this, inverting this, then my expectation is for price to reach down for 0.005138. All right, draw that back. However, as long as we hold this, then I do expect some kind of resurgence here. So let's drop this onto a daily now and see what we've got. So we can see here, they're not quite perfect, but the bodies are respecting this to some degree. It can be a little bit looser on crypto assets, especially if you're going into the kind of smaller ones, especially any of the lower caps or really anything outside of BTC, ETH, you know, they can all get quite illiquid. Now, using the same principles again, we have this, right? So we have this bearish gap above us. Now, what did we say? If we've swept liquidity here and we continue to hold this gap here, on a daily basis, we would be looking for price to reach a little bit higher. So we want to look left and see where price is currently reacting from. Now, we can see that we've got this very, very slim gap here that price is going into. But we also have this, which is our inversion, all right? Again, I know I bang on about these a lot, but we so very often at reversal points, see these inversions, see bearish gaps that should reject price, get closed above, and therefore lead to higher prices. Or, obviously, if the opposite is true with lower prices. So if we draw this across here, we can see that this is also engaged with price at the moment. So this could be leading, to a short or long-term reversal. We don't really know. That's why we want to approach these things on an intraday basis. So at the moment, daily bias is that price is probably going to kind of move up towards this. Don't worry about that, Craigie boy. You are very welcome, my friend. Right, so price, I think, on a daily scale is drawing towards this now. So we're going to use our 4 hour to get a little bit more granularity on it. And we can see, you know, that we've got those kind of similarities that we looked at, obviously on Rune, but also like with ETH as well. So I'm just going to do this in red again so it stands out. Whilst we're within this, we've got a very, very similar situation here where we're kind of within a bearish gap, but also price is engaging with a bullish gap. If we get any long setups in here on the lower time frame, remember that kind of system where we're looking for a low to be set, we look for that low to be swept, recovered, and then move up. Yeah. So, you know, you're looking for a sweep of a low, then you're looking for the high that swept the low to be broken above, and then you're looking for somewhere in this area, right, to get involved in the trade. So while we do that, hold this area in the green box, looking for long setups, close below it here, and then we have some nice pre-made liquidity targets down here starting at 0.006003, and then also here at 0.005925. All right. So, all right, let's take a look at that. And then who else? We wanted to take a look at Ondo, didn't we? So let's flick this back to a daily scale. And let's take a look at Ondo. Okay, so I actually quite like the look of Ondo here. So first of all, reaction at this low. Remember what I said when you see these kind of key swing lows or swing highs, look how the candles react. Now, we came in, price got absorbed, buyers, price got absorbed again, buyers. I mean, I say buyers, not technically true in terms of liquidity theory, but it's a much easier way to kind of conceive it, right? So people have stepped in here, Price has gone up, set this beautiful pin bar candle with a very short nose, and now price is looking to move higher. So the next thing to consider is that we're delivering from this bullish gap down here, right, which is also a really good sign. So we've swept liquidity, we've dug into a bullish gap, price is now looking to move higher. Also, if we take the Fibonacci from the obvious swing low to the high here, or if you wanted to take the dealing range from the point that structure was broken here, both we can see are nicely below this 50% level. So that adds extra confidence. Now, if we want to be extra cautious here, or we want to be cautious regardless, but we certainly want to be aware of it, is that we have this bearish gap here. All right, again, on a daily scale, we want to see price close above this. If price does close above this, on a daily scale, realistically, this is the next obvious swing high, which is, I know it's very high at 1.4421, but we do see crypto, when it steps into that state that it wants to react, it can react incredibly quickly. Oh, apologies, guys, for taking a little sip of tea. So if we look at this now, we've got a clear upside target if price goes down. Now, obviously, we will finesse that on the lower time frames. You know, we're not just going to blindly hold for all the way up here. But if price holds above this, yeah, it goes from a bearish gap to an inversion, meaning that we would then go to purple. It's obviously not that at the moment. It's just a regular gap. Bearish, but I'm doing it in red so that you guys can see that it's resistance. So moving to our 4 hour, I think what we're going to see is fairly similar. But actually, this is slightly nicer here on Ondo. And again, you can see how this area resistance sells off, we create the gap, comes back up. When it closes above it, look how it's dipped into this. What I really like about this here, there's a few things. One, we have our inversion here. That's really key, all right? So price has inverted. That should have rejected price here, but it didn't. Price closed above it. And again, then look what happens. Price then expands up to the next point of liquidity. So as we look at this here, let me just turn the session breaks off actually so you guys can see it clearer. As price has come in, it's dipped into this perfectly and moved higher. Now, what else it's done here on the close of the previous candle is it's set this lovely bullish gap below it. So at the moment, you can see how there's a lot of support stacking here on price, and not quite equal highs here actually, but we do have a clear liquidity target at 1.2398. So as long as we're holding this level here, then, you know, I'd be favoring bullish setups higher into this. Now, we do need to remember this is a key liquidity level. It's a high within a fair value gap, right? So chances are you're going to get a lot of stops up there. So the intraday trade, I think, would be pretty quick into this level. Look to secure stops early, you know, take some profits and then see if we do get that continuation higher. All right. So that's certainly how I'm looking at that. But that does look very healthy at the moment. Again, you know, Bitcoin will have a big say in what price does across any crypto pairs. All right, so do keep an eye on that. And then we had one more here, didn't we, as well, which was Pendle. Okay, let's have a look at this. Not come across this one before, so thank you for the introduction. Let's take a look. A big zoom out, shall we, and take a look where we are here on a weekly scale. Okay, weekly actually looks quite nice here. So we can see this nice weekly gap supporting price here. Actually dip back into it here. Not that much of a thing really, because it's kind of been rebalanced to here. But again, you can see how price came down, found a weekly gap, set a low, swept that low, generated the liquidity it needed to push up higher. And then it's taken out, had a rejection at one of these weekly highs. I was wondering that actually, not too sure. Might just be in the background, taking notes in her fastidious way. So as we've come into this, the key thing that I'm looking at here is how we're respecting this bullish gap, right? So I'm just going to remove this one because it's a little bit superfluous at the moment. Look how the bodies have really tried, yeah? So the bodies tell you what price has done, the wicks tell you what it tried to do. Price tried to push down here, couldn't push down, tried to push up, couldn't push up, ultimately closed, or actually opened, pushed up, came down, and then came into here, right? So the bodies are holding this. We've got a nice pin bar candle here that swept liquidity from the prior week's low. And we've also, this week as well, swept liquidity from last week's low. So this, for me, is looking really good here while we hold this. So moving down onto a daily, we would definitely have an expectation for expansion here. The super safe play here on the daily is this. We want to see price close above this bearish gap, right? Close above here on a daily scale, and then we can just start picking out targets here. We've got this one at 6.3416. This one that's obviously very, very close by as well at 6.3965. And we've got equal highs resting here as well at 6.4836. So let's put those in there. And you can really see how there's a lot of kind of liquidity here drawing price higher. So in an ideal world, we'd get a daily close above here. And then intraday, we'd be looking for these pullbacks and for price to come up and take out them. Yeah, I know, Geo missing as well. Can we believe it? Huh? Maybe a holiday. I think because we're on a US holiday, by the way, guys, on traditional markets today. So, for example, we won't be doing our live trading sessions today like we normally do because the volatility is off and we trade the US market open, right? So with that being closed, there's an expectation for slightly less volatility, or could be quite a lot less volatility when we're trading traditional market assets like the Nasdaq. However, crypto continues to plow on, and crypto can and is its own animal. So what can we do to finesse this some more? Well, it's going to be a little bit like the other alts, but we're going to cover it anyway. On a daily scale, we need to see a reaction above that. But again, and this is actually quite nice because we can take a look at this here. This bullish gap that we've got here, right? What we haven't seen on the others is the formation of this gap. We haven't seen it retested yet, but we've seen that here now. We've seen that here in the London session, right? So we can take a look here on Pendle and see what we've got. In terms of upside targets, obviously we had the immediate high, which was here, which was already taken out. So you want to see that retrace down here into this gap. And then from here, I think this intermediate term high over here, it seems like a really good, initial target, which is set up at $6 flat. So you really, really enjoy those kind of flat numbers because they're so often key for price. Right, so now as we're looking at this here, turn off my boy Raz's liquidity levels, which again, see these little black lines that you can see on the chart here? Yeah, see these ones here and here. These come back from where there's stop losses. A good friend of mine and wonderful team member of mine over at the Bird Nest called Razoon makes these incredible indicators and tracks these liquidity levels, a lot like you get with these kind of paid suites, such as things like Kingfisher and bits and pieces like that. So these are where there's high leveraged liquidity, so stop losses. And look at what happens when price breaks out above this cluster here and there's no liquidity above it. Look where it gravitates towards these. But I'll maybe get him on a show soon so he can run you through that and a load of his other really clever plays, all right? But at the moment, I just want to explain to you, show you a kind of live-ish version of what I'm discussing, right? Because if we go back to the 4 hour quickly, when we look at those other charts, we've been saying about watching a reaction at these bullish gaps. Well, this is the first one that's actually really given us one to look at. So when we step in on the 4 hour here, we've got our gap. What's happened? We've shifted structure here and we've displaced above this high, all right? So really, really important for me. We look at that, we say, okay, low, high, low, bang. This is now going to be a higher high, yeah? So we've come in, set a low. Now, this here in this structure break, you want to see this done with momentum and displacement, right? Leaving these gaps. So when we trade into this gap, again, we're favoring long setups. And we're going to do that, or I would certainly look to do that here within the London session, all right? So what do we want to see? We want to see price purging down here, right? So remember, coming down, this is our London session here. As price comes into that at the latter part of the session, this is where we want to see sweeps. This is where we want to see reactions at gaps, and we can see what we get here. We get sweep from these lows over here, or obviously taking out local lows here as well. Now what happens, right? We look for price to break the local high. Remember, as I was saying to you, so let's just draw the diagram over here again. We want to see a low set, low swept, yeah? Then we want to see the high that created the low, closed above, price to come back in and then trade higher, right? So what did we get? We said we want to see a gap in and around here, or we want to see that level drawn across, and that's where we then look to take our entries, okay? So what happened here? Let's zoom in. Price induced within our London session, which is perfect. Here's the high, yeah? So that's the high that was set before this candle came down and swept the low. So what do we want to see? Price expand through that, yeah? Take out that, and then in here, we have this lovely gap. Look how perfectly it's respected. Just going to do that in a darker green, so it kind of stands out a bit more. Yeah, price has come down into this gap here, which is where we can take our entries. You can put them on the starter line of that. Your stops go below the swing low. Yeah, so that low set before price went up. And then again, like we said, you're looking for those clear and obvious liquidity targets higher up. So that's really a textbook example of what we're looking for on those other setups. All right. Now, you may have different entry methods and bits and pieces like that, but that overall is kind of a snapshot of the type of entries we would look at. And all of that has been done purely by framing it through the higher time frames, right? So on our 4 hour here, just going to get rid of this quickly. Yeah, we can hide it. We can leave it there for later assessment. All of this has been done from here because we had this expansion high, because we expanded aggressively through this high, changing, that structure, expecting bearish continuation here. We closed above this order block. We've set this bullish gap here. So we're saying, okay, we want to see price draw into this and push higher. Why? Because when we look at our daily time frame, remember, we're still within this daily gap. So we don't know if price is going to conquer this gap or not, but we don't need to. We know that price is being drawn up into it, and especially drawn towards the liquidity from this high. Right, so now we've taken liquidity from that high, we can step in and say, okay, we can now look in and be on a little bit more of a granular scale. So we see this high here, yeah, price came in, swept that, corrected, move lower. What's happened? We've then caught a bid down here, which is exactly as we lined up, because we said, look, we're reacting from a bullish gap here. We should be looking to push up from here. If price on the 4 hour had come down and closed below this, then we would have been targeting short setups lower down. All right. So we're going to close off the stream there. Hey, morning, Oh Gregory. I just saw you there, my friend. FET and PHP. Do you know what, mate? I will sneak FET in for you. We've got probably another couple of minutes. Let me just do a quick rundown on FET for you, buddy. Where are we? Here we go. So FET on the weekly is holding a very, very, very skinny gap down here. All right, it's a very skinny bullish gap. Do that in green again so it stands out. Well, actually we won't, because it's such a high time frame. We'll keep these ones in silver like we normally would. So it's holding that at the moment, and price has taken out a key low down here, and it's actually displaced below that low. Yeah, Beavers, very welcome, mate, very welcome. So it's displaced, closed below the low. Yeah, what you want to see, if price is looking to have a strong reaction to go the other way, as we see here, we set a high. See how price can't really close above it. There's no, look at the size of the body. Big body, lots of momentum, lots of volume, lots of people shorting this. So as we close down here, we're then saying, okay, well, where can price head next? We can target the gaps, another gap here, and eventually the lows. With this one, price simply couldn't get back above it, right? So we're now saying to ourselves, all right, if we've taken external liquidity, where are we heading for to fill the remainder of this gap here, right? Which was actually this, because we'd already set this low. So then price comes, it holds this, so we can't be bearish till it closes below. What happens? Price closes below here, inverts this gap, and then price heads for the next available liquidity. All right. So on a weekly scale, while we're holding this, we're saying, okay, well, let's see if we can get some kind of bullish resurgence here. Remember, we don't mind. This is a weekly gap. A daily close below it doesn't mean anything. We're looking for this to be a weekly close. And I think this is going to look a lot like the other alts, actually, that we've looked at today. So bearish gap here, meaning that that's drawing price towards it. Where are we reacting from? Well, we can see we've taken liquidity from this beautiful intermediate term low, the low that's within this big fair value gap. So what is price doing? Well, price is holding a bullish gap here on the daily. So let's just draw that in so we can really paint the picture. Obviously, you don't have to keep these on your charts when you're doing it. I certainly don't, but I'm always it's nice to do this and kind of have the visual representation. So think of it like this. We've taken liquidity from the lows. We're now bouncing from a bullish gap. We're holding a weekly gap. So we're looking for price to push a little bit higher. Now, if we were looking at this as our kind of, our expansion leg or our displacement leg lower, then we could say, okay, well, we normally look for this to draw back up to the top 50%, right? So this gap makes a lot of sense, but so does this little order block here and possibly this gap higher up. So at the moment, looking for this to kind of push up on an intraday basis. So finessing this onto the 4 hours, we can see here, again, just saying, as we just literally said, actually, just seen an initial rejection at this gap, all right? Now, we need to remember that this is a bearish gap, so we're going to do that in red again. So while we're seeing that rejection, we don't know if price here is going to follow this on a daily scale and really push this higher. What you want to see is this candle close above that gap, yeah, inverting it, and then we target this level at 1.376 All right. Now, on the downside, if we're looking for this to be bearish intraday and maybe a little bit more, is we've got this bullish gap below us here. We would need to see price close below this, in which case then I would be looking to target these equal lows, which, you know, I really like the look of those equal lows. Actually, they're really good liquidity pools at 1.1058. All right, guys. Look, I've got to shoot off now, unfortunately, because I've got another meeting, but thank you very much for joining us there. Simon, hello, mate. On Pendle is bearish flag on the one-day chart. On Pendle is bearish flag on the one-day chart. What can be bearish? Yeah, so PNDLE USDT, which I think we went on. Did we go on this one? I think we did that, didn't we? Did we? No, obviously not. Yeah. I can't remember which chart we used, guys, but just looking at this, on the daily scale, you're talking about this being a bearish flag on the one day. Yeah, so you're looking at it like this, right? So you've got something like this on your mind that you've kind of got, if you kind of got, especially if you're focusing on the candle bodies here, you've kind of got this like rising wedge, right? Or yeah, like a bear flag. So they have, I think, a 60 to 70% chance of dropping out the bottom of these. So I'd watch for those deviations. The way that you can kind of look at that as well is if you draw in your gaps for confluence, right? So there's our bearish gap here. You can see if we do see a rejection here and we start to close below here, then the chances are that the next liquidity we're reaching for is down here at 4.5942. All right, guys. Look, apologies if I didn't get around to your charts today or that. We will be back next Wednesday. Obviously, going to be live again on Monday. Please do check out all the bits and pieces we have in the description. Got some brilliant offers to join some great exchanges like Femex, where we're active over there every day. You come and join us on Pulse. And get loads of goodies, even for just liking, commenting, sharing some stuff. You can earn rewards that all convert into USDT. Apart from that, you can get all of our calls for free just by joining on some of our exchange links. We've been profitable now for a considerably long period of time, almost 3 years. We did almost 400% in returns for members last year, and all of our P&L is printed for members on a weekly basis. All right, guys, you can find out everything and more that you need to know about that in the description, or reach out to me on Twitter. Just wishing you all, hey, Raphael, mate, I didn't see you in there. I'll see you over at the nest shortly, my friend. But I look forward to seeing you all soon. We'll see you again on Monday. Take care as well, Gregory. Thanks so much for joining the stream. We'll catch all you legends soon. Have a really good week. Remember that, you know, there's a no news day in the US because the markets are closed today for a national holiday. So hope all of our American friends are enjoying that. I'll catch you legends in and around the less later on.